over $320,000. That means most potential homebuyers need between $10,000 and $60,000 saved up. Here is some advice on how you can boost your savings. We've got David and John Auden Schneider, the debt-free guys and co-hosts of Living Not So Fabulously. Guys, a pleasure to see both of you. John, let's start with you. What is the biggest way that you want to advise folks listening to reduce their expenses?
Yeah, you just had several guests in a row talk about how everything is getting more expensive for the American consumer. So some of these tips might have been unheard of even 3 months ago, but they're becoming more common today. One advice we have is that you move in with friends or family to offset some of your costs. We have 2 clients who've actually done this. One client of ours was able to save over $10,000 in 1 year by living with his mom and dad. Another recommendation that we have is maybe it's a tight market in most of the country, maybe not in the South or Florida, but now might be a good time to consider selling your current home, putting as much of that profit into a high yield savings account, and waiting until later when you can either buy a bigger home or when the opportunity is more appropriate for you and your family to buy the right size home. In the meantime, maybe live with mom and dad or maybe downsize to something smaller. And then a third suggestion is maybe looking at some of those things that were luxuries once upon a time, maybe cutting those out, like DoorDash and Instacart subscriptions. We're paying anywhere up to $924 a year in subscription services alone.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I always tell people to look at their biggest buckets of expenses and how they can cut that if they're trying to save. So I'm glad that you brought up the great point about housing costs. David, what are you looking at in terms of some ways to save up extra money?
So one of the things is that now is the opportunity, especially with the gig economy, for folks to figure out ways in which they can earn just a little bit of extra money. We're seeing a lot of individuals who are wanting to either pay off debt or are trying to save for a down payment are doing things like freelancing or starting a side gig. We actually know clients of ours who they pet sit through Rover on the weekend and are making somewhere between a couple of hundred to over $1,000 a month. That helps them save for that down payment. The other thing is that if you're getting ready to move, you probably have a lot of stuff you don't necessarily need anymore. So go out on Facebook Marketplace or Craigslist, places like that. Start selling the stuff that you aren't using and put that money aside for your down payment.
Yeah, it's a really great point too. And John, I know you're also monitoring some personal accounting changes you can make so that you can maximize your saving. I love the sound of that. What does that look like?
Yeah, one suggestion is you can adjust your W-4 so that you get more money every paycheck, twice a month or every other week, have you. Just remember that you might have a little different tax bill come the end of the year, so you definitely want to make sure you do the math to make sure it makes sense for you, as well as talking to an accountant. Also, do a strategy that we call send it before you spend it. As soon as your paycheck comes in, go ahead and pay whatever bills you have to pay within that duration of your pay period so that you don't think that you have extra money around that you don't necessarily have to spend. And then finally, there are some amazing cash back and rewards credit cards out there right now. Take advantage of those to the extent that you're able to, but make sure that you remember that somebody's subsidizing all those rewards and you don't want that to be you. So pay your credit card off every single month.
I love that. So well said. David, I also want to get your take just on how much money you should think about having saved before you even pursue the idea of buying a home. What's a good kind of range?
Yeah, I think this really depends. You showed a stat earlier, anywhere between 3 and 20%. But if you're using one of the local or national programs that are for down payment assistance, then look for the guidance that those programs actually provide. In some cases, you may not have to have a down payment at all, depending on that program. If you are looking for a conventional loan, then please find a qualified mortgage broker, whether that be through your local bank, credit union, or even an independent individual. They're going to be able to not only find you the best rate, but they're also going to help match up that down payment to your particular financial needs. But keep in mind that just because they say you can afford it doesn't necessarily mean that you can. We want to keep in mind that there are also other expenses related to owning a home. Insurance is one of the big ones right now that is being talked about, and as you mentioned, in Florida and in the South, especially because of natural disasters.
Yeah, it's important to look at the totality of those costs. A lot to think about. I will continue to be renting in my New York City apartment until I retire and move to Florida someday. But you guys give me hope that I can do it.
Yeah, so there you have it. There were also, ideas of how, can save some money when it comes to being in this economy, because, this ain't no joke out here. It really ain't no joke. Especially living in cities where, you're not, even though you might live in a by yourself or with two people, usually you need a job, a full-time job or a side job, or a gig or a part-time job living in this economy. So go ahead, Ronnie. What's your take about building up down payment for buying a house in the future?
Yeah, that's what you need to do. You need to have side hustle. You gotta understand how money works because right now, when the housing market situation was going on, that just about one decent house is going the down payment is gonna cost you at least about 60 grand. I would listen to a woman, a realtor, say that on a recent podcast on Earn Your Leisure. Shout out to them, and she mentioned the fact that how housing market today is gonna be very very difficult for the middle class. But if you understand how money works and understand that you may have to cut back on certain things that you normally buy just to be able to purchase a good home. You might have to do so. You might have to get a side hustle. You might have to learn how to get into some investment. Learn how to stop going to certain social events because you're trying to save up for the home. You may not be able to go on trips every month if you really want to buy a home. So it's very, very difficult, especially right now in this economy. But one thing she did mention, shout out to her, she mentioned something. I forgot her name, but she mentioned something that was very important. She said, "Don't let this be a discouragement. Let this inspire you, so you can be able to bring generational wealth in the near future." Go right ahead, Akeem.
So I just want to just preface this and say this. What they was talking about doesn't apply to everybody. The average American is not going to buy no home. Let's just get that out the way. Shout out to the 18th letter. The average American is not going to buy no home. The average American makes $40,000 to $50,000. I just want you to take that number now. Housing is upwards to $300,000 to $400,000. You need to make an upwards to $10,000 to $12,000 a month so you can be able to save $2,500 a month for the next 2 years to save up $60,000 for a down payment. Simple math. Now, they didn't even mention closing costs, moving in expenses, turning on the lights, and all this stuff. So we're talking about that $60,000 turned into $80,000, $90,000. So now you're not going to do this as a single person. You got to have somebody with you. So they're not even thinking of this way. We have to look at this totally different for people who are not going to be able to afford this. You feel me trying to say? You're going to have to move in regions where you don't want to live in, out in the boonies, off the beaten path, rural areas where the houses are a little bit cheap. Might have to move to another state. Might have, you know what I mean? So these are the things that I think they didn't talk about, where I think the average American is not understanding, but there are ways to buy a house. But if you typically want to live in a city, that's out the question. You know what I mean? So I just want people to preference that and put that in their mind.
That's a very cool point, I can. I also want to add this too when it comes to, what also people that don't think about buying a house is when it comes to you having your own house, you gonna have to do your own maintenance. It's not like, you have an apartment, you can call the landlord somebody, if your AC's not working or faucet's running and everything, your faucet's not working, your bathtub's not working. When you have a house, you got it's a maintenance that you have to pay. And I think, especially in, some people that want to buy a house so bad, they don't think about, that, also would get home insurance and everything. And they also do pre-inspection before you buy a house, because if you don't do that and then you buy the house and then you get the house and you feel like, okay, you got all this stuff that's, wear and tear in the house. It can be AC, all that type of things. You have to pay your money for your pocket as well. So I think, especially in our generation, and how the economy is pushing for us, it's the majority of Americans is going to be likely, be renting apartments or renting condominiums. As we can see, cities like Miami, cities like New York, here in LA, and other big cities, as you can see, there's a lot of areas that are building condominiums, also apartment buildings. So, so going to these cities, it's more likely that, Americans is going to rent instead of buying the homes. Me, I do want to buy a home in the future. That's still a possibility in my hands and everything. Still working towards that. So, somewhere outside of California, which, I mean, I'm sorry, outside of Los Angeles, where there are some houses that are being built that is a really good, decent price for me and my wife and everything. So, yeah, people, I know I'm more, like I said, I'm more of people. If you want to buy your home, like listen to what how to save and everything, but just remember, when it comes to maintenance, pre-inspections, insurances, you got to think that in mind too. So you might could save 60,000, but you probably need an extra 30 or 40,000 for maintenance itself for the house for like a year or two, because it might be a guarantee that you might need a new AC, heating, all types of stuff. So people be aware. Please be aware about when you buy a home. There's other stuff you got to pay as well.